No worries. So what I'll do, just this one for the recorded part of it. The session is about MUnit with Anypoint Studio examples. Ikram is hosting it for the record, and I am speaking about it. Since we missed the recording, we started delayed, so never mind. Yeah, so emulate Mule applications testing framework for automated testing of your integrations and APIs, right? And the good part about that one is it is very native to Mule runtime itself. It is very native to any point platform. So it has its own embedded Mule runtime, so that you can really simulate how your applications run in actual runtime, and then you can test the behavior of your applications or APIs or anything about it. It is fully integrated with the Maven build process, which is the primary build process for MuleSoft applications. Whether it's Mule 3 or Mule 4, both will be same. Mule 3, it is still there. So I won't say it's not there, but it is still there. So that's MUnit. And like I was saying, it is very native to the whole MuleSoft platform itself, which means it has a very good support in the Anypoint Studio itself. So you can create your test cases through Studio. You can interactively see how they look, how they execute, look at your coverage. Like on the right side, you can see the green checks that tells you those processors were part of your test case that you created in your Studio, right? So it's very, very good representation of your tests and everything. So it has a good support in there. So that's very primer of MUnit, because I believe all of us knows MUnit, at least the introduction or the basic part of it, right? So from feature point of view, some primary features of it are, so what you see on the screen right now is the structure of your test. Like, how does the MUnit test look like? How is that structured, right? So there are three main parts of it. One is a behavior, execution, and validation. So it's like a given when then BDD style thing in there. So in behavior, you define how how your components will behave when you execute your test case, right? You could be calling another APIs, database, or whatever, and they could basically external dependencies. You don't want your tests to fail because external dependency wasn't available. So you define the behavior in there. Then execution, that is like when something happens, like your flow gets executed. That's the execution one. And then the lastly, the validation. Okay, you defined behavior, you executed something. Of course, you will want to be validate now whatever had happened, right? So you will use the validation for that validation section for that part, right? We'll use the very different assertions and everything in there. We'll see what you can use in there. So that is the anatomy or the structure of your test. Next, as usual, in any unit testing framework, you will have mocking, and so does MUnit has. So you have a mocking components there, which allows you to mock processors that are in the Mule application. So you can mock them and define how they should behave when your flow gets executed. And that is the primary use of that is to remove external dependencies from your test. Your test should always be executable and predictable, and they should always be repeatable. So no matter what happens outside, your test should always produce the same result in there, right? That's what it says about the mocking. The next one is spy. Spy is another useful one, because your flows will usually a chain of multiple processors. Like you call another subflow, then after that you again call an API, and then you may again be calling a database or something. So you will have a chain of processors in your flow, and you may want to inspect a particular processor, what happens before that and what happens after that. So you can spy on any processor to verify the before and after situations for that processor are expected, right? So you can use spy for that one. Then the from the validation section, verify. Yes, so there are so many assertions or so many things that you can use in the validation section, and one of them is like an verify call. Since you have a multiple components in there, you may want to verify that, okay, when I called, let's say, create user API, it is calling my system API or it is calling my database to post it. So you may want to validate that, yeah, this component was called when this flow executed, right? So that is your verify call, which should be there. And general rule of thumb that I usually follow is, if I write a mock anywhere, like if I mock something, I always write a verify for that one to make sure that whatever I mocked there was actually called during my flow. So just like, because if you have a mock and it is not properly set up and it didn't get called, and if you don't have verify in there, you will not realize that it didn't get called, right? So it's always safe thing to write a verify for whatever you are mocking in here, so that way it ensures, okay, I was supposed to mock an API call to my system API, and I verified that it was actually called during my execution. Of course it will get mocked, but at least I am assured that it was called during my processing, right? So tomorrow, if somebody accidentally removes that call, your test will fail, and you will know that, yeah, it was removed, right? So that's the verifying there. Assertions, apart from verifying the validation, it has a very rich set of libraries that you can use in the assertions, like assert equals, assert that, and assert expression. Those are the primary three components that you can use. Assert equal is very simple. It's like A equal to B, my payload is equal to this. So that validates that. Assert that uses some predefined matchers that come with the data view functions. Like for example, MUnit tools dot equals to, and then you give your own payload. So it validates that whatever the payload is, it equals to this. It is little more than the assert equals. Assert equal is purely equality, but in assert that you have various predefined functions that you can use. Assert expression, it is more powerful. It's like a next step of assert that. There you can actually create your own data view functions as an assert matchers, or the assertion functions that you can use, and that you can build and then use in there. It also comes with a inbuilt lot of um, utility functions that you can use. But if you find use case where those doesn't work for you, you can just write a data view function and use that as an assertion function in the assert expression. So this guy is very powerful, assert expression, like for advanced asserting. Or if you can think of it as like, okay, I have an object coming back from my API and it has an UUID in there as an ID. Now I don't have anything to validate UUID. So you can just write an data view function which either validates that ID has the correct format or removes that ID and then compares the rest of the objects. There are a lot of possibilities with that assert expression thing. It's powerful in there, right? The other main features are parameterization, where you can run the same test with a different data set. So you can think of that as a Java function where it accepts one argument, and then you want to invoke that function with multiple different set of arguments, A, B, C, D, and validate how that function reacts or how that flow reacts to each parameter, right? So it basically helps you to not to duplicate your code just because one word was different in your test case, right? Like only the payload was changed from A to B, and then you are copy pasting the whole test and creating the another one. It saves you from doing that. You can just define different parameter set and just one test, and it will execute all the same test, applying all the parameters in there. Api test generator, probably the most popular one, because so many, almost all of us write APIs with API kit, so we always use that, like in generate router from there and go, create test cases from there and then execute it. MUnit test recording feature that came like recently in last few versions of MUnit, that is also really good. It quickly can bootstrap your testing because you don't have to write the lot of stubs and all that stuff. So you can actually run your application and ask it to record your data as it flows through the system, and then it can dump all that data into test structure. So you have like a starting point of your test cases, right? So it saves you time there. And then the usual components of any testing framework: before and after test scope and before and after test suite. Those are also there. And the other utilities, not I don't know if everybody uses these or not, but there are utilities like database or FTP, or I think there is one more, maybe dynamic port is another one. So you may use those to mock your FTPs or database. The database is usually just creates the in-memory database for you to use in your test cases. So you can use that if you want, right? Then test coverage for Mule processors, the one that I was showing on the very first screen, where you saw the green check marks, right? So that tells you if in your flow there were like 10 processors, and how many processors were actually invoked during your test case, right? So it shows you all of that. Oh, we jumped straight into the examples time. That's good. Okay, so that's why not so much of theory, because we all are aware of the theory. So let's see some examples that I wanted to share today with all of you. Is my studio readable in there?
Yes, it's clear for me.
Okay. If not, let me know and I can probably zoom in on something. So I'll just go in here, right? So there are examples. Let's see the first one, right? So we have a simple flow which tells me, okay, core test get users. So it's gonna get users from my system APIs, and it has certain validations and certain conditions in there. So it requires you to send a user ID, because since you are getting a user, it requires you to send the user ID. And if user ID is not there, it's gonna fail, saying it cannot be null, and you need to retry the right one. If it is there, then it's gonna go and call your API, whichever it is. I'm just using the example.com and the /user/user ID. Once it responds nicely, it is just creating the dummy payload from there, and the flow will end right there. If something goes wrong, you don't find that user. So here you can see the error is error mapping here. So HTTP not found is nicely converted into app user not found error, instead of propagating the HTTP not found as it is, right? So there are a couple of scenarios, or in usual way, what we say, there are a lot of branching that could happen during the processing of this flow, right? Like you can get terminated here, you can continue on this path, or if something goes wrong here, you will go here, and if something unexpected happens, you will like just get thrown out of here, right? Because I only have a on error continue for one specific error type. I don't have any other, so it will just bubble up. So if I have to write like a test for it, what I would do is the very first step that we saw there. If I don't pass the user ID, I will expect a validation failure. So the very first test is like just blank. I'm calling this my flow, not setting the user ID or anything. What important here is, if I look at my test case, I should be validating that, okay, when this thing calls, I am expecting my app invalid argument exception there. And why that one? So if I go back, let me close few of the XMLs, because Studio will just go, it starts spinning. Okay, so going back here. So I have this user ID in here, and what is done here is then error mapping. So validation null. So if user ID is null, it is again remapped to app invalid argument. So argument whatever you sent to this flow is wrong, and then it has an error message to it, right? So you can actually reuse this invalid argument error message error type across your application and specify the error in at each level. So here the error is going to be this. So my very first test case will be, okay, just drop the flow in there and ensure that if I call it without setting the user ID, it is going to tell me the error type is invalid argument. And then the error description there is going to be user ID must not be null. Remember, this thing is not an exact match. It checks for the string contents. So as long as this exact string is contained in your message that you are throwing, it will succeed. But if it doesn't contain, so user ID must not pass. And if I like just do write ABCD here, now that string is not part of this whole message, the test will fail because error messages can be any longer, right? So as long as you specify a certain string that you are looking for in that error message, you will be good. So here I'm saying, okay, user ID must not be null. And if I run this one, that is what it will validate in there and make sure it succeeds. If it doesn't succeed, you know it's gonna your something is wrong with your that particular validation. So that is the very first step to test. It will continue. I'll let it run. Then the next step, as we move into the flow, the next step we see is, okay, I'm calling the HTTP and anything like the very first thing, positive. Let's be positive. The system API will return us the data and we will transform, right? So the second use case then is a positive use case. So we are now going to set our user ID in here, and then we are going to call the same flow in there. But this time will not let it call our system API. So we will mark it HTTP request. The important part that here is always use attributes of your processor. Like I have seen examples where either a doc name was used or like this guy, like this one, request, right? This thing I never use that display name in any of my mocks or tests because that is very brittle. Anybody can change the display name. Like if I come and I feel like request doesn't tell me what using, so I can just change request username. Boom. If any test was using it, it's broken now, right? So don't try not to use the display names. They are not supposed to be for that. Pick an attribute that you can uh, safely use, and if that attribute is changed, the complete behavior of your flow is changed, right? So like if tomorrow I decide instead of calling slash users, call slash people, then that is a complete change in the behavior. So then I know that the failure was valid. Like if somebody changes that one. So always pick right attributes from your actual flow. So we mock that one here, HTTP request. So what we do here is if we hit there, instead of making the call, excuse return me this payload, right? And it says like return a application JSON with this particular user object. So it is going to return me that. If we continue, then as I said, if I have mock, I will have the verify for it with the exact same definition. So I have exact same definition and get user and the same path. So I know that I'm expecting it to get called. And then the now execution has happened. What we need to validate, right? Definitely we need to validate is before calling my HTTP, because my HTTP here, if I go back and look at my configuration here, I have an URI parameter which is mapped here as a user ID and vars.user ID. So which tells me that user ID is a must thing for that HTTP requester, right? So what I would do for that is like, okay, let me add an spy here, and then again same configuration to identify the component, HTTP request method and path. Once I identify, then I say, okay, before you call my HTTP, make sure the vars.user ID is set to 1234 because that is what I'm setting here. So that way I validate it is set there before HTTP is called. So that what that does is that again gives us flexibility. If tomorrow somebody wants to change the behavior of how that user ID is passed in, it ensures that this If somebody changes that, they will know that they have to change the requester here also, because test is gonna fail. Test is gonna say that, oh, that user ID is not there, right? So that's why we validate that, and at the end, then assert response thing. So when we call the get user ID, we know it's gonna return us this object. So we define an expected payload for that one, and then we say, okay, assert response payload, which is an assert equals. So it just says what is the actual thing and what is expected thing, and then a message. So then we say, okay, this whatever is the payload, it should match with my this expected payload, which is this one, right? So we know if I know if I send 1 2 3 4 as an user in there, it is going to call my HTTP. It is going to return me an object into this structure. So that all part is validated there. That is positive one. This alternate positive use case. It's the same setup. The only change here is in my SPY HTTP before and after. Now I am using an assert expression to ensure that whatever that HTTP is returning me, it's basically my mock only. But for an example purpose, you can write an assertions for the after call, after the HTTP call, to make sure the payload returned by that is this thing. So you can see two ways to write it. If I go back to my mock HTTP in the previous example, I hard coded that one here. So I put user object here. It is not very reusable. If my user object is same and I want to reuse that, it's not very reusable. So the other way is like I can write that user.json into my test files somewhere here, like user JSON object, and then instead of hard coding it, I can reuse this thing anywhere I want it, right? Like get resource as stream, test data, user.json. And then same thing then I can do in my after call, validate validate the payload written by HTTP equals to the same file, and assert expression, the one that I was saying earlier, it is more powerful. So this is what I was referring to. It has a very nice module called as TW test assertions. So that module comes with lot of functions that you can just use. So here it is just saying payload must equal to resource this thing, right? And I think if you look at the documentation, you will see it includes lot of functions in there, and you can actually, this is the function. This one is just like any usual data view function. So which means you can write any other your own data view function and use that instead of this function, like comparator, my own comparator, and then you pass some value in there, right? So it is that much flexible. It compared to assert that only. Assert equal doesn't have anything. So that isn't just an alternate way of validating the same flow in there. The other negative part now, so what if user was not found? We saw that when user was not found, I was supposed to get the app user not found, and then the payload just says user not found for example purpose, right? In real world, you'll probably not say like this, but something better. So the difference that makes out here is, again, I make the same selector for my HTTP, but in the error, then I define, okay, it should throw an HTTP not found error. And when that thing executes, verify HTTP was called, but this time my error expected payload was this, user not found, and I just assert that one. This is another way of, this is assert that, right? A third variation, assert that. The first one we saw assert equals, now this is assert that. So it says an expression, whatever this expression results into, there is a matcher that needs to be applied. So here the matcher is equal to matcher. So payload must equal to this one. And there are so many functions that you can use, like in here, um, uh, here equal to not null, or both match. If you have multiple matchers, you can apply multiple matchers with media type. Like, so media type is also a useful function. So if you are expecting, you have an API and it must return a JSON all the time, So at the end of the flow, when your flow executes, whatever is the payload that comes out in your test, you can actually validate the media type of that payload, right? So if I say right now here as an application CSV, for example, then when this flow runs and the payload that it is gonna create, which I think is the J- JSON value. If it is negative, Java, it is Java, right? So if I run that one now, it's gonna fail, saying your payload is not of the CSV media type. So that again helps us to make sure the MIME types are always correct for any payload that we are sending or receiving back from any flows and the subflows. Hopefully the demo god is with me and it really fails. Yeah, it failed. Let's see what it says. Come on. Yeah. Okay. So, oops, sorry. So here it says return user object. This guy expected application CSV, but was application Java. So if anybody accidentally rewrites your data weave and forgets to change or correct the application MIME type, you see that one, right? So that's very useful in there. That's for the more of a core tests, like core components of your MUnit. We will come back to this guy. This guy, I will just tell you this, right? Like this one, I have one flow here, which is core test create users. It is literally not doing anything right now. It is just setting a request ID as an UUID, and then it is simulate saying as if, okay, I got the creation username request, and then it is returning this mock payload, right? And if you see here, so look at this log here. The log is got creation for username, payload.username, because when the user object comes in, it is going to have a username attribute to it, right? So it logs got a creation for username for request with vars.request ID. Request ID is nothing but this guy here, that one created, right? And if when I ran that test, the test actually succeeded, right? Like this thing, create users here. So test succeeded, which was expected, right? So everything is good. So let's keep that in mind and we'll come back to that point. So that was all about the core one. The other good example I wanted to show was about the parameterization, the one that I mentioned, right? Like it saves us from writing or duplicating a lot of test code. So if we look at this example, the most popular example probably the airline code, where you are requesting the list of flights by airline, right? So this gets and this flow has a choice router there, and based on the airline code that you send, it will fetch you the list of flights. So if you send United Airlines or Delta Airlines or Spirit Airlines, right? Like if you send those three, you get them. Otherwise, you get everything. So how do we test like this type of stuff where we have a lot of combinations in there? And one way is the traditional way. You can write an test case, passing in the different airline code each time and validating that it calls a certain flow in there. That is one way of doing it. The other way could be you start with a parameterization test, right? So what does parameterization test is? So this is the test, right? Parameterization test flow. Excuse me. What it does is it calls the get flights. It sets a variable, the airline code that we want in that flow, right? And then it has a marker. What happened to my studio? Why it's not letting me pull up this guy? Come on. Okay, wait. Okay. I guess this one should be visible. I'll switch to XML if that is better in there. Going back to parameterization test here. So what we do here is on the XML MUnit configuration. What happened? It's not letting me click. Time to restart studio. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Hey, Ikram. So far
Yeah.
it's audible. All good while I'm
Samhita, there's
restarting.
one question from Abhishek, but one, is it
Okay.
fine or we can wait? Okay.
Yeah, feel no, you can ask now since we already took stop. Maybe one
Okay,
question.
just one question so far right now. That's from Abhishek. He's asking, can we make the test cases sequential
Mhm.
or say in order the way we write it? At present, it just picks any of the case randomly and executes that, but I want it to execute in sequence I wrote. Basically, I want the run in
Uh,
sequence, all the test cases.
yeah, I mean that question is not really for just MUnit. That is for
Mhm.
any testing methodology, and I would really recommend never ever to do that one. That is the first rule of the test case, right? They should be isolated from each other. They should be predictable. They should be repeatable, which means it doesn't matter when my this test case runs, it should always give me the exact same result, whether I run
Mhm.
that as a first or the last or in the middle or alone or with the
Yeah.
whole suite, right? So the straight answer, no. There is no way to order your test cases. There is no guarantee, and I doubt any testing framework will ever give you that one. Maybe somebody will give, but that's a probably a disaster recipe, I would say. So don't try to do that. Whatever the conditions you want to, and that is the reason why we have behavior and mock and everything, right? So every test should have its own environment properly set up. So that way you can always confidently run that and say, okay, it's always going to verify these things, irrespective of where and when and how it
Yeah.
runs, right? So I hope that answers. Okay. So going back to parameterization here. I think, yeah, it's open here. So what we do in parameterization is, uh, it is not letting me click on the global elements. I'll just close all this. Reopen probably just one. This guy. Oh, come on. Okay, just go to XML. Seriously? Seriously? Something is not right here. Wait. Sometimes this guy does a lot of issues. See, yeah, I knew that was the issue. The zoom part. Anyways, so we are back in business here. So parameterization. What we do parameterization is uh, we define a set of parameters that MUnit should use for each run of that execution, right? So if I say probably XML is better in here. So here are all the parameterization, right? And in parameterization, I create a one suite of properties and give it a name. So the first suite is United, name is United, and it has certain properties defined like key value pairs. When this parameter set is executed, the airline code should be set to UL. And what I expect it to do is the expected flow call. It is just a variable. I mean, it has no meaning. You can write any names, anything. It's just like an instead of writing in the properties file, you create make key value pairs here. And I say, okay, when the airline code is UL, this is what I expect. Same thing for Delta, then this, Spirit, when this, and then the final one, when airline code is null, then I expect it to call the scatter gather test flow, which is get me all the flights, right? And then in our tests here, in our test, so this is the parameterization test flow. The difference that you will see here is in the mock when, instead of writing a name, I write it the property name dollar expected flow call, and this is what we have defined in these combinations. So expected flow call for this, expected flow call for this. So when you execute, all those parameters will be replaced by MUnit in each execution. So same thing, set variable in our execution is taken from the parameterization, right? And that is what will be our airline code. So that's in there. So probably I'll switch back to the here guy now. Yeah. So yeah, everything is back now. So airline code, that's what in here. And now if we run this parameterization test, just this test, what we will see is it will run that number of tests, that number of times your test. So the same test got executed 4 times, every time with one parameter set: United, Delta, Spirit, and all. And it will pass all those parameters in there and validate that it when UL is set as a United, it calls the corresponding flow for it. So that way, in just like one test case and with parameter, you have verified the all this flow in here, the whole set, that it executes as expected when the different type of airline code is sent to this flow, right? You have validated all those things in there. And if you want to see that failing, you can see that just change in something to wrong name in here. So I guess that was UL. Yeah, UL was wrong. And if you rerun that one, it doesn't fail all the tests. It will fail only that one parameter set that caused the issue. So that way you can identify, okay, it's only the issue with the United, not the rest of the parameter combinations. Come on, go. Yes. While that runs, the next test here is exactly same. The only difference is it is not mocking the calls that is making. So here, our United failed, and it nicely tells you, okay, it didn't. So this guy is bad. Like verify doesn't really tell you which component failed. That's something hopefully will be improved soon. But that's problematic there. That's I can't do anything about it, but I can just tell you that this call here failed, and it was expect. There is only one verify call in our test, so it's easy to find out which call failed. But imagine you having the 4 5 verify calls, and it is telling you that flow ref failed, expected one, got 0 calls. Hopefully in future releases it improves and it really tells you what had failed. But right now that is the state. It will tell you which one failed. Hope if you have more verify calls, probably a good luck or bad luck. Okay, so that's in there. So that's the parameterization. It will only fail whichever one had issues in there. This guy is exactly same. It is not mocking. So if you run this one, it is going to actually make calls when UL, it is going to make call to the UL flow here, and that way, in the same parameterization test, apart from the verify call, you can actually verify different stuff like what it is passing, right? Like for example, if we go here and see, I think all my tests are returning similar type of data structure here. So here, right? So flight code, airline code, and DAL in there, and this guy is also returning same structure. So if I want to validate the payloads that they are returning, I can validate that one here, or I can actually like say, okay, assert equals, and I know every my mocked flow or the current static flow always has always returning me three objects. So I can actually verify that whatever combination I call, it is returning me 3, right? Size of payload, yeah, that's fine. So it says default. Okay, we'll default it to array. Size of flights. The interesting part here, how we can extend that parameterization set to whatever we want. This could be an example for it. So let's run it and see how how it works. We are almost there. Come on. So one thing you will see with this guy failing is if I run the no mock, which one it ran? Oh yeah, it's running the both. So one thing you will notice here is this no mock failed for the all. It succeeded for the other because when you are asking for the specific one, it is always giving, oh, this guy failed because we changed the name of the expected flow. But for others, for count, it matched. But for all flow, it failed because in case of all, the count is really 9 because it is aggregating all those 3 flows in there. So in such cases also you can extend that parameterization, and you can actually add a new variable here saying, okay, number of flights, right? Flight count, expected flight count maybe, and then you say it here 333. For everything you say 333, and only for the all you say 9, and then where we had hard coded number 3 there, instead of hard coding there number 3, we use the flight code there, sorry, 9. And then we get this our guy back, and where we had that flight count hard coded, where was that? Here. So I'll just go here. This is easy. So assert equals this we had coded to 3. Instead of that, we will now use the flight count. So that way we remove that static part also. Now it will just run and really validate what is relevant for every code. So that's how parameterization can help us to get testing very quickly for a broader combination of your data there. That's parameterization. Next one is scatter gather. This one came because we are calling the same flow from here. From this guy, this is going to the scatter gather, and now the scatter gather has a combination, right? When it calls, it's gonna call all my flows in here, and then once all those 3 flows are called, it is gonna aggregate those flights into a single collection, and it's gonna return me that. And things can go wrong in the scatter gather there too, right? So scatter gather here, we make that call, we verify all those 3 flows are called because we have only those 4 flows in there. By we use flow ref and then get their name, they get called. And at the end, we know that it's going to aggregate all those 3 payloads. So we can validate the size of the payload, number of records that it returned to be 9. We can validate that one. That is a positive use case where everything went well. So let's say something went wrong with the United Airlines and the API did not return in there, and it just threw the timeout error in there. So when we are calling the United flights, it's gonna throw the timeout error. In that case, again, our scatter gather flow in here was supposed to still continue and return us the successful results only, meaning if just give me the delta and the Spirit Airlines flights in there. So we test it by this way. So mock your airlines, get United flights, throw error from there, and then make sure all 3 are called. But now here in assert equals, the size of payload will only be 6 because the 3 from United are gone. So we have only 6 in here. You can write any assertions to really validate the data, validate the content of it, or validate some attributes. But the idea here is to just show what you can write down there or what you can validate in there, right? So that's the positive and negative both cases for your scatter gather flow in there. That's in there. I think we are almost at time and it's still going. So let's take few minutes and I'll show you a few more things. And one thing I wanted to show was, okay, the VM flows. Usually we use VM queues. So again, for VM queues, we can use different stuff. Either we can mock them or we can actually let them write into VM. So the first one was just this guy, which is getting the payload, converting into a JSON, and writing that to a file. This is a very simple use case and simple test case also. You just set the payload, call that flow. The part here is you don't want to really write to a file. So you just mock that again by path, like the actual path or whatever the decisive attribute that you can choose, always choose that, not the IDs or anything, right? And as I said, again, verify the file write was called in there. For queuing, when we have this guy, listener, and then you have an message coming in, again calling to that flow, and it also has the publish to queue. So how we can validate the publish on the queue? Two ways to do that one. First, you set an event, meaning setting the payload of the flow. Remember, if you have like an VM listener or such things, it is very likely that you are using some of the attributes of that inbound listener or anything into your flow. So always remember to set those attributes too. For example, here, the very first flow in here was using received message on, and it is saying attributes.queue and now in my mock, if I don't set that attribute, my test is anyway gonna fail because it will say you're trying to concatenate string with a null value. It will fail. So always keep in mind to set the attributes also for your listeners in there. You call that, and then for the publish part, you can mock it like VM publish, mock it when the queue name is test q2, which is where it is pushing, and then you verify that VM published with the same name was called. That is one way of verifying it. Second way of verifying that is actually letting it publish to the that queue. So here we are not mocking the VM publish. We are leaving it as it is, right? So we verify first the VM publish was called, but after that we use the VM consume from the same that second queue, test q2, and once we consume from there, we again validate the content from that second queue. So we actually validate it was published and the published content was what we expected on the other side, right? So we consume data and we have it. Even if you have another flow which is listening to that particular queue, it is not gonna run. By default, all the listeners are disabled unless you explicitly enable them, but they are disabled, right? So you can do that one, and then you can assert the payload of that one. So what happens here is we actually validate, we are really calling the publish, and on the other side of the publish, the payload received is what we expected it to be and what we sent, right? So we validated that one in there. The last case, a quick thing, 7.4. So 2 more minutes and I'll show you. The last one was about the API in there, and you have an API router that you configure. And usually, what we do is the create test suite from test API XML from API specification, and it scaffolds the whole API specification, creating all these flows in here, right? Like all the flows, the bare bone data structure in there. Two parts I want to highlight here is one, what you can do is in your HTTP listener configurations, you can use the you can use the property names, and then instead of using the specific port, you can use MUnit's dynamic port configuration, like this guy, dynamic port, and give it the property name of your listener. So what that does is it doesn't tie your test to a specific port. Every time it runs, it finds a unique port or a free port, and assigns that to your listener. So less chances of colliding or failing test because 8081 was used by something else or all those stuff, right? That is that one you can do. And if I run this, there is a one failure that I wanted to highlight. Let it run. So there was one use case here, like post user. So it is posting the users. This is the payload username Manik. It is posting the JSON to our create users endpoint API users, and it is expecting, okay, whatever my result code is 200, it's wrong. It should have been 201, right? You know, but if we see here, it failed, right? And it is actually calling the same flow, the one that we saw in here, this flow, this guy. And if you remember, the individual test of that flow succeeded. Like when we ran this individual test, it was good. It was good. So then what's wrong? If we look at the console quickly here, yeah, this guy. So what do we see is a got creation for users name, payload.username for request where.request ID, and it says unable to infer output media type as more than one is being used. Why? Our individual test case succeeded, right? And only why this is failing now. So the important part here is when we are calling the API, the API's post was for JSON, right? It's the JSON, it's posting the JSON. And the individual test case that we wrote, we mocked the payload, but we mocked it with the Java, like application Java. And if you see the very first logger in this flow, like this logger was logging it, got creation for username of payload.username var.request ID. So that for that individual use case, this payload and this var both were of the Java type. But for the real use case or the real API call, this one was actually JSON and this one is Java because we created that thing here, right? Like it was Java here. So I have seen failures just because something was put on the debug and it was not properly considered the payload types of it. And when in the real production something went wrong and the debugs were enabled, suddenly it caused more issues because now your logger started failing because this guy and the other guy was not of the same type. So instead of helping those debug logs, instead of helping, they were creating more problems. They could cause more issues, right? So always make sure when you are writing a test case, like for example, we could have found that easily if we remembered in our this individual test case, this guy here, that oh, the original payload that is coming to this flow is always going to be JSON. If we had done this thing in this unit test itself, we would have got that one, right? So always remember the MIME type also of the mocked data, the data that you are mocking or the processors that you are mocking and returning different data sets. Always consider the MIME types that they are sending. On a safety side, you could also do always if your if API is complicated, a lot of data structures are going here and there, at least make sure your these guys are always having like a Java or a given structure, a given MIME type. Now it won't fail. Even though even this test case will not fail because whatever are the combinations, we are explicitly telling data view to convert everything into Java. So it will typecast even the JSON into Java and it will succeed. So if you want to see this one running, we can see, but that's, come on, it will go. So that's a very good thing to remember because you don't want in the production when you are really have debugging some issue, you enable the debug logs by turning on some category and then you find out, oh, it's causing more issues because the MIME types are were not correct in the logger versus the Excel. So now it succeeded because it got actually converted into Java and it must have printed it somewhere that it received a request, something, something, something. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much of what I wanted to show. Ikram, let me see.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much of all the flows that I wanted to show for now. Let me switch back to the
Okay.
here,
Thanks.
and I think,
There's one
yeah,
more
that was
question
the
from
last slide.
Abhishek. He says, how
Mhm.
to write MUnit for bad jobs? Can
Yeah.
we have some demo for that?
Mhm. How to write bad job stories? That's a great question. I always like that question because many times the answer, and even if I ask for others, the answer is always points back to my blog. So there is this blog that I wrote some time ago. It was purely focused on how to unit test your patch jobs, right? It was more on the Mule 3. Then there was a part at the end in the series which compares that with the Mule 4. I can send a link happily here, right? So in that series there is also at the end the last part was comparison between the Mule 3 batch and the Mule 4 batch and showing you the differences. So I agree. Testing the batch job is tricky because a lot of asynchronous parts are there. Like so many things happen asynchronously in there, different, and there is not predictable where when your particular step will run, right? So you should always consider that. One thing I have been following is when I'm writing a batch in there, you will probably see the same thing in this example too. That in the batch step, I usually try to avoid writing all the logic in there. I always keep it in the separate flow. So that way batch is separate and my actual business code is separate, and I can actually just write a normal test cases for my subflows or the flows that are actually processing my batch, right? And then I can come back and just focus on for testing this batch to ensure when batch step 1 is called, it is actually calling my batch step 1 process. When step 2 is called, it is actually calling my this flow. Since I have already verified and tested those flows outside of my batch, it gives you a more comfort of saying, yeah, I know that those flows are good. I just need to make sure they get called at a expected times in there, right? I
Yesterday
hope that was
was
helpful.
the demo from the person who wrote the blog.
Oh, demo. I don't think I have that I have project right now. Like it's been a while, so maybe in the next one we can. Maybe the next one I'll schedule something for specific to bad jobs only, like bad jobs, testing them and all that. Yeah, I'll be happy to do
Okay,
that. I
thanks so
think today
much.
it won't be possible to cover that
Anyone
in here.
else has any questions? Do you want to post anything right now?
Yeah.
I think so. It was
I
just Abhishek.
think we got. Yeah, I
Okay.
think we are good. Yeah, I'll stop my
Yeah.
sharing so you can share, Ikram. Is good. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening though. I hope it was like all readable and the see like
It
the
was very
studio and
informative to
everything
me
was in
for
here.
the parameterization because it was new for me as well. So I learned something new. I learned something new from you today for the regarding the parameterization. I didn't know that.
Sorry? I, oh, okay, okay. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, this one is gonna be on the GitHub. I will give the link to. mm, it will be available on the GitHub. I haven't checked in yet, but I have always been. The project was created a while ago, but the code wasn't there. So I will push the code, and you can always see that. And that probably will keep growing. So I plan to add like more and more scenarios and examples in that same project in there.
Okay, it's trivia time then.
Perfect. Ikram, yours. Yeah, I guess so. So how you want to
Just
do?
seeing
Can
it.
you explain how
Okay,
the process will be?
so what I'll do is I'll just give you guys a link, which will be from Office Forms, so which will have the questions. So and we'll give everyone 30 seconds to answer the questions. So after every question, we'll give 30 seconds, and once you answer, we'll just select the person who all have answered correctly, and from those persons list, we'll check a random person as a winner, first winner. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes,
It's
yeah,
about
yeah,
the timer.
yeah. We can see the
Okay.
screen with it.
So I'll just give you guys a demo question just to see whether the URL works fine and I can see everything fine. Not then we can do. I'm just pasting here that the first question. So just let me know once you guys answer it.
And I tried clicking on that GitHub link. It opened in the new tab too, so I don't think it will override your browser windows. It should not.
Okay.
It should open in the
Okay.
new window.
Okay. So totally I got 8 responses so far.
Sorry?
I got totally 8 responses for the demo questions. Okay, still I'm getting. So I think so it's working fine.
Okay, that's good.
So maybe, okay. So what I will do is I'll post the first question, trivia question. So yeah, this is the first question. So time starts now.
Click on the second link, open, answer the question,
Yeah.
and come back to the screen. This is actually good option. I think in the past ones we had a question showing on the screen and then like trying
And
to
I
find
can
out
do
who
that
answered
again.
first. Yeah.
Yeah. If,
Okay,
okay.
that's good.
So that's it. So I got 10 responses. Let me share the responses.
Okay, yeah, that could be fine. So um, what we can do for the next one, maybe Ikram, since they have to type the name also, maybe give the link and start the time maybe after 5 seconds, or
Okay.
right, or we
Okay.
just make it a 35 second because it's
Okay.
valid. Maybe just give a few
Yeah.
seconds to type a name.
Okay.
Uh,
So let me pull the list.
oh, missed my name. I think you can submit it. Or or simply guys, just keep your name copied in your clipboard and just paste it. Don't type it, right? Just keep it copied from the
Yeah.
chat window and paste it.
Okay.
No, it doesn't matter how quickly you answer. It's a 30 second, like Ikram said, it's 30 second, and whoever answered correct randomly, it will be picked from the correct answers only, which is probably better than fighting for like trying to answer first in there. I like this option probably better than the other one, Vikram. Maybe I'll use the same one for the next meetups.
I saw in one of the meetups, so I thought, let me use it.
Yeah, that's nice. This is good. Okay, so do you want to show the answer to first one first, or get all others done?
Oh, I mean, I'll show one by one.
Okay,
Just a minute.
either ways
I
you
think
are
some issues. Just a minute.
okay. So you are sharing the second one now?
No, yeah, I'll just we'll finalize the first one, first winner. Is that
Uh,
is that
that's fine too. Yes. Or we
okay?
can do the winners at the end. Let's like just keep the sets
Okay,
together.
okay, that should be fine.
Right.
Okay, let's do that way.
Mhm. We'll do the spinning 3 times. You have access to the previous ones, right? Like who answered and what they answered. So we see the red stop.
Okay, I'm going to paste the second question, and I'll
Can I make 35 seconds just to
just see whether they have option to edit it.
that's okay. We can just start it. Just click on that after counting to
Yeah.
5.
Okay.
After we put the link. Put the link.
Okay. I put the link. So 1,
1,
2.
2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
can start. 40-second timer. Oh, at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the bottom there are more timers.
Okay. The time up. I'll give the third question now.
I was talking on the mute, sorry. Yeah, third question, and then we'll do all together at the end for all three.
Yeah, this is the third question. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, time up. So I think so. I've got all the data. So just give me a minute. I'll
Okay,
consolidate everything.
okay. So we'll see the correct answer once you show that data, or probably yes.
Yeah, just give me a minute. I'm
Okay,
just
okay,
formatting.
okay, okay.
I'm having some issues with my Excel, so I'm just pasting it my Gmail and trying it out. Sorry for that. Can you guys see my screen? Manik, can you see the screen?
You're saying yes. Yes, yes, I can see your screen, and I see
So
all the.
basically, the first one is for the first question, and
Yeah.
second question, and third question. So can I know which is the first right answer for the first one?
The first one is assert expression. It has like
Okay,
a
asset
more
expression.
powerful data weave functions there. Plus, you can write your own functions. It's very powerful there.
So how do you want? We'll just select
I would say
everyone
no.
from.
I would say do it for get the first name because we already have a lot of variations in the first one, right? So just pick the correct
Okay.
from the first, so that way we can choose one winner from each question.
Okay.
So Alexander, is that the first row your name? I see an entry without name there.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Oh, there. Unfortunately, the entry gets invalidated there. Uh,
who is the one without the name?
Alexander.
Okay, it's okay.
We can consider it
Okay.
because he already declared that he did it and there is no other conflicting entry.
Okay, let's go for it.
Yep. Spin, 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 spin.
Oh, winner is Swaroop. Congrats, Swaroop. So I think so.
It's okay.
So it's running again. So can we consider that to be a Swaroop, the first one?
Yeah, the first one was it. It's I think every time you close that pop-up, it's gonna spin again. There's another one which is what was that? I forgot it.
And wheel of names.
Yeah, wheel of names, right? That's I mean that doesn't show this type of thing like a blocker and all that.
Let's try
Yeah,
it.
that's the one.
So
That's
can you just
everybody
ping me
use it.
your ID?
Sorry?
No, I just asked email ID.
Yeah. Oh, you already put the
Okay,
names?
next. No, for the first one.
No, this wheel of names. I see some names there. That's what I was asking. Maybe those are
Default.
defaults.
Okay.
Defaults. Demo mode.
So for the next question, let's see. This is the second question. So
Second one was which MUnit features which yeah, parameterization.
just
So
parameterization.
yes, test parameterization. might have to click on OK first. Yep. So those Alex is here too. So you got anyways chance there, Alex.
Hey,
And
Stacy.
then last Stacy.
Okay, let's go for the
That's
second
okay.
one then.
Yes. Tap, spin, spin, spin.
Okay, it's Praveen. Congrats, Praveen.
Hey, congrats, Praveen. Yeah, see, this thing shows like better. It do all the spins and everything.
Okay, Praveen, so even congrats on your winning. Okay, great.
Yeah. Last one.
Yeah,
Verify call on the same processor. That's the answer. So first two and then Venky and Stacy. And then after Swarup, Venky and Stacy. The one before that also. Basically all those three. Venky, Stacy, and Praveen.
yep.
Praveen, I would say you can skip his name because he's already a winner in the previous one, right? So that doesn't increase chance of winning two things.
Yeah, and Kumar, we have one Kumar.
Yeah, and Kumar.
Oh, it's for next processor. He gave an different answers. Sorry,
Yeah,
Kumar.
if I call him Kumar. Yeah. So spy on the same processor will probably have the same issues. Like you wouldn't know if it misses from execution. The only way to know that something was expected and called was verify. Ramola, congratulations.
Congrats, Ramona. So I need your email ID as well.
Congratulations to all winners. There are three, not just one.
Okay.
All right. Did you copy? Did you get all three email address? I think you missed the Praveen's email address. Or you got it? Oh yeah, you have it. Okay, I got it.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone,
Uh,
and thank you,
yeah.
Mani, so much for your patience and
No,
generous
I really enjoyed it.
episode. Yeah, and to be frank, I learned more on the it's very much it's difficult for me to
Yeah,
do the I feel okay, it's more of kind of development task for me. So it's
yeah. No, I know. It's good when it's learned on the community side. So thank you for giving me opportunity. Thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for listening.
Manik, thank you so much, and thank you
All
everyone.
right.
Sorry, Manik, anything?
No, I was just gonna say thank you very much.
Okay, and if you
It
have
looked like you had a K. Sorry, I think Stacy saying you look like you have some additional letter for
anything,
uh,
email.
Ramolas. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for
Thank you so
noticing
much.
that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Just make sure, maybe just check one more time all the email addresses and names. Um,
Wait,
right.
Praveen Raj.
Yep. Thanks, Stacy.
Thanks, Stacy. Thank you so much,
All
everyone.
right.
And please feel free to share your feedback and any Mule meetup topic that you want to discuss in future. So that
Yeah.
we can arrange for the future as well. And let's keep this meetup group active. Thank you so much, and thank you, Manik, once again.
No, thank you very much. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.